Well, there will be some new MPs on Parliament Hill and some former MPs looking for new work. The federal election not many Canadians wanted until it heated up is over. Only some tattered lawn signs left. Stephen Harper is still the Prime Minister. He now controls Parliament. Patrick Smith is still the current director of the Institute of Governance Studies at Simon Fraser University, where he teaches political science. And it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Smith back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi again, Jenny.
We live in interesting times, as some wiser person once said.
We do indeed.
What's running through your mind this morning about the results of the federal election?
Well, I think there's 3 or 4 stories. I mean, the fact that Mr. Harper got his majority, I mean, there was an element of accidentalness to it, I think, in the sense that there was a real collapse of the Liberal vote. So that's a piece of the story. The natural ruling party of the 20th century may not be the natural ruling party of the 21st century. The absolute surge of the New Democrats to go from 37 seats to, I'm not sure what the final tally would be.
102, last count.
Last count, 102, 103.
103.
Exactly. And then the decimation of the Bloc Québécois. So they're all parts of the puzzle. And then there's a little BC angle, which is that all of that dramatic change in much of the rest of the country didn't play out very much in BC.
Joyce Murray, Hetty Fry, still Liberal MPs.
Liberals lost 3 seats, I guess. They had 5, and I think they ended up with 2. The NDP picked up 3, and the Conservatives lost 1. I think that was the end result, which was in the realm of possibility without dramatic change that we saw in other places.
Ujjal Dosanjh lost in Van South to Wei Young, and it begs the question, when there is a potential scandal or a very messy allegation that she was associated with Malik at some level, it doesn't stick, obviously, or the voter didn't buy that. Malik, alleged terrorist, yes, acquitted, but still alleged. Why do some things stick and hurt a politician and other things don't?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, we were talking before you come on about the pre-branding of Michael Ignatieff and how that did stick, and he wasn't able to shake it despite a bus tour, the summer before the election, all those kinds of things to show him as a human being rather than some kind of
public intellectual.
Exactly. So that didn't. I think there's going to be a lot of head scratching by party strategists after this is over about negative advertising, also about how you manage things. I mean, I had thought honestly that the Canadian public would react a little bit more to the bubble idea, the controlled idea that Mr. Harper ran and some of his candidates ran, and Wei Young would be I put in that same category, the same as the Conservative candidate and Burnaby Douglas, who were no-shows throughout half of the campaign, and were running for public office, which seemed to me a kind of an odd situation. Why, in her case, there wasn't more impact to what was, the biggest, the indication that that there was an association with somebody who had been, tried for, not convicted of.
Terrorism.
Association of terrorism, the biggest mass murder in Canadian history.
It's a bit shocking. Back to Ignatieff and the branding of Ignatieff before he even came back to Canada. They already said he's just not Canadian enough, and he's a Harvard professor, and he can't relate, and he's an opportunist. Why didn't the Liberals, do you think, come out right then and destroy that message, rather than sitting back thinking somehow it would go away?
That's true. Ignatieff himself picked it up late, actually during the campaign. He talked about Mike Pearson and other Canadians who'd spent time in their lives abroad as diplomats or whatever, and had come back, and how Canadians had felt proud about that rather than anxious about it. But it was, as you say, I think it was literally too late. I think to respond early on and to challenge the notion that somebody should be, that there's different classes of citizenship depending on where you live. I studied for 5 years in London, England. I've probably felt more Canadian in England and coming back home and making a conscious decision to come back home.
Yes, you often do, and it is a global world, global economy, and you certainly want a leader who is well-traveled. Ignatieff resigned as the Liberal leader this morning, said he would do whatever they wanted him to do. He made the announcement this morning. Now what? And the Liberals obviously have to pull in, rethink, restart. Party of a confederation, supposedly the Central. What is the Central today? Perhaps that's the question. What is the family party? All of the parties say, well, we're family first. Am I a family? Are you a family? What does that mean?
We could ask the Surrey School Board what family means, but maybe we won't go there. We have different kinds of families now, absolutely. But I mean, at the moment, clearly, the NDP have taken over that role of defending whatever you want to call them, working ordinary Canadians and families. I think there's probably some capacity in the Liberal Party, given their history, to recreate themselves. You think of the Diefenbaker debacle in '58, where Diefenbaker won 208 of 265 seats. The Liberals in '68 were back with majority government after the Pearson years, and then ruled for another better part of a couple of decades. So they have the capacity to rejuvenate. My sense is there'll be
so do the Conservatives. You may have noticed after Kim Campbell, 2 seats or something, and look at them today, majority.
Sure. So I think it's too soon to write off the, we're talking about the death of the Liberal Party, but I mean, it's going to be a challenge for them to take on the New Democrats. They're going to be campaigning for some of the same territory. I think that in terms of what's going to happen in the Liberal Party, there will be some interim leadership, and I would think it would be somebody in the likelihood of a Ralph Goodale or a Bob Rae as an interim basis. Rae may, in fact, wish to be a candidate for the leadership itself, but I would anticipate we're probably going to get generational change. So you're going to see the Hall Finleys and the Gerard Kennedys. I think too soon for Trudeau, although it looks like he held his seat, which will help his career in the long term. He may be the leader after that.
But he's not his father. No. Who is their father, and because he's a Trudeau, I don't think people will vote for him. Not that he's not a great MP. I don't know Justin, I know his brother. But I doubt that the Trudeau name would carry, especially now. That isn't what they're going to look for.
That's right.
But a young leader, somebody that has that spark.
Yeah. I mean, if there was one other person that you might throw into that mix, if there is generational change, and maybe it would be Romeo Leblanc's, Dominic Leblanc from New Brunswick. And the Liberal Party also have this tradition of alternating between Anglophone and Francophones. And Leblanc is from New Brunswick, but he's a Francophone. And Ignatieff would qualify as Anglo, I suppose.
Okay, and now there are many NDPers coming from Quebec. You may have noticed.
Yes.
The Separatistes, pretty much the rump, doubt that the Bloc will come back. What do you think?
I think it's more likely that the Bloc will not come back in the form that it's been, which has really been the kind of the reason we've had this history of minority governments, that the Bloc have done so well. I'm not sure. Again, I think the PQ are still strong in the province of Quebec and are the government in waiting. So that's the organizational base for the Bloc federally. But I think Quebecers just came to the realization that a party permanently in opposition wasn't necessarily their best route, certainly for soft nationalists. And so Mr. Layton may have a few questions about meeting his new caucus and where they'll maybe want to push the NDP on some policies too.
And why now for Layton? First time in history, right, that the NDP has been official opposition?
Absolutely, going to Stornoway.
Was it? I know. Was it the debate? Was it? Did it start there? Is it a discontent that there even was an election no one wanted? Was it that he can talk very plainly about taxes and business and opportunity? And, it's not heady. It's not saying, well, this isn't democracy, and it doesn't say pro-rogue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He just says, here's what I'm going to do for you, and it's plain and simple. A little bit like Elizabeth May talks.
Sure, and going to do it now, as opposed to 3 or 4 years.
Spend lots of money, and it's all good.
I think a couple of things for why now, in terms of Layton and the NDP. at the beginning, we talked, I guess, 5 weeks ago, or more or less, about at the front of the end of the election, we were talking about what would define the narrative, and it seemed to me all the parties tried their narrative. The Liberals were talking about jets, jails, and corporate tax cuts, and Harper was talking about the economy, but also the kind of bubble campaign. So there was strategy and message. In the end, I thought Canadians actually took over the kind of narrative and decided what they wanted. And one of the messages, and I think why there was some wind in the NDP sails, was a simple fact is that the NDP ran a more positive campaign, that they actually presented some real alternatives. People can argue about, the costing of these things, but they actually, they had the least amount of negative advertising, and I think there'll be some reflections on whether there's an upper limit to negative advertising as the strategists learn the lessons of 2011.
And someone threw out the fact that Leighton had had a massage in the mid-90s or something in a rather suspect place.
Yeah.
And maybe the Tories threw it out, maybe the Liberals threw it out, who knows? But what a strange thing to do.
My understanding is that, in fact, that this is a story that's been put around during several of Jack Layton's previous elections, including in city council still in Toronto. It's been known. I mean, he certainly knew about it, but it's been touted before. And finally, we got a quality journal like the Toronto Sun managed to pick it up and make news out of it. But
yes,
I don't think.
But it wasn't news.
It wasn't news.
It wasn't, and it didn't stick, and it didn't work.
No. But
none of the above.
That's back to your, what sticks and why that was.
Well, I think maybe the Canadian voter was saying we don't want any more elections for at least 4 years, and we're tired of this, and why would you want to call one now, and what were you thinking? And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to vote for you.
Sure, yeah.
You think?
Oh, I think Canadians are also fair-minded. It might be that they're saying to Mr. Harper, though he only got 40% of the vote, his vote was almost unchanged. But they've given him a majority because of the way our electoral system works. But 60% of Canadians voted against him. So there's going to be a lot of attention to whether he moves on a hard right agenda, as has been the fear over the last couple of elections.
Right.
He showed some capacity in the last two parliaments to be able to work a minority government, which takes some finessing. So we'll see now whether there's another Stephen Harper or whether he's not as scary as
George Bush?
Yeah.
I don't know. Everybody's speculating. Per vote subsidies pretty much gone, or what happens now with that?
I suspect they are. It's interesting. I mean, we haven't really talked about Elizabeth May, but I thought her strategy, her approach, was what Sir Humphrey and Yes Minister would call courageous, to concentrate on a local campaign rather than a national campaign. That under the current funding will definitely hurt the Greens because they get money per vote, and it looks like their vote's probably half of what it was. But she's got a seat in Parliament, so the next time that there's a consortium talking about all party debates for election, she'll be there.
More history made.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
So in the end, the strategy that might have backfired and will cost the party money, perhaps was brilliant.
Patrick Smith, our guest, he's a professor of political science at Simon Fraser University. We'll come back.